Chapter 7. Good day to you, fair lady. Startled, Helen jumped back and nearly collided forehead first with the stranger before her. Of course, she'd forgotten Dylan Woodwords would arrive at any moment. She plastered on a broad smile, knowing full well how becoming it was. Her greeting had the desired effect. She caught the distinctly admiring glint in his dark brown eyes. Senor Woodwords was even more attractive up close, tall, powerfully built, with thick dark hair and a sun-kissed complexion beneath a clean-shaven jaw. His light brown sweater looked simple at first glance but was clearly of fine quality, molding perfectly to his broad shoulders. This was how Helen imagined the quintessential macho man, yet she immediately dismissed that label. Macho implied rough sensuality, almost animalistic, but Dylan Woodwards' face was refined, perfectly arched brows and a straight, delicate nose. More handsome than my Kevin, she thought with a twinge of annoyance. In her heady state of new love, she'd vowed no other man could surpass her chosen one. She told herself Dylan was merely pretty. Kevin's features were far more ruggedly masculine. Besides, what else to do with a money bag like this except luxuriate in one's wealth all day? Her mental commentary lasted mere seconds before she steeled herself into professional mode. But even then, Dylan didn't give her a chance to speak. Gallantly, he ushered her into the familiar suite, settled her into a chair, and asked if she would care for coffee. Helen accepted, and in an instant the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee appeared on the elegant side table. As they sipped, Dylan inquired how she liked the hotel and asked several pleasant conversational questions, treating her more like a cherished guest than a pesky reporter who descended upon him for an interview. Already, Helen felt as though she'd known this charming young man since school days. And she sensed no hint of flirtation. Dylan simply possessed a masterful knack for putting his interlocutor at ease. When the formal interview began, Dylan answered even the most hackneyed questions with good humor. He confessed he spoke 2.5 languages fluently, German from childhood, passable French, and for business in Italy, English suffices. I only speak conversational Italian. Helen gently steered the conversation to the question that burned in her mind. Why, if he was truly from Cleveland, was he staying in a hotel instead of a home? He'd already told her he ran small businesses abroad but was a native of Cleveland. Quite simple, Dylan said readily. Spending most of the year in Milan, I saw no sense in owning a house here. Besides, I have no time for chores. Here, he swept his hand across the suite, the service is top-notch and rates are reasonable for a business trip. Why doesn't he say he'd rather rent an apartment? Thought Helen impatiently. Maybe he's not discussing that with a journalist or has already made other arrangements. She felt Dylan's eyes on her, laced with a teasing glimmer. What if he already knows I sneaked into his suite and recorded his conversation? Stop imagining nonsense. She ordered herself. True, Dylan continued as if nothing had happened. There is one drawback to living here. Helen braced herself, certain he'd accuse her of trespassing journalists. Instead, he said, regrettably, most of my business partners' offices are downtown, so I'll be forced to relocate there soon. I'm not thrilled by constant commuting. His tone was slightly petulant and arrogant, but Helen shrugged off her reaction. You could always rent a proper apartment, she suggested in her most composed real estate agent voice. There are plenty of listings. Dylan shrugged doubtfully. I prefer living with homeowners, so I can pay extra to have laundry and dinner taken care of. But first, I'd like to meet the homeowners in person. Helen struck a sympathetic, interested pose. Don't you have acquaintances in Cleveland? Of course, he replied. But they're workaholics like me, home only to sleep. Hardly the sort to handle household chores. Here we go again. Helen thought. Leap in feet first and see what happens. You know, she said, striving for nonchalance, I could offer you one of my rooms for a time. I can't promise presidential treatment, but I can cook dinner and take your suits to the cleaners. Dylan raised a surprised eyebrow. Are you sure? I've always thought journalists lead frantic lives. And yet I dine at home nearly every night, Helen shot back bravely. And as you see, I don't traipse around in stained clothes or dirty shoes," she hastily added, adopting a tone of feigned indifference. "But of course, I'm not insisting you stay with me. The choice is yours." Dylan sat quietly for a moment, drumming his fingers on the armrests. Then, as if deciding, he tossed back his head, folded his arms, and fixed Helen with a cool, appraising gaze. His eyes had become sharp, distant, like a predator sizing up its prey. Though who's the prey here? She wondered. "Very well," Dylan said thoughtfully. "That will suit me. But I must warn you of my conditions." Helen stiffened. "I intend to live in your home for 1 month," he continued, shooting Helen a keen glance. "During that time, you must not be absent from the house for more than 24 hours at a stretch. Should that occur, our agreement is null and void, and I reserve the right to have the payment for the days already spent." Helen's spirits sank. She had imagined spending that month with Kevin, popping home each day to cook and check in. Now her dream of a honeymoon-like getaway crumbled. "And I was already thinking of taking time off." Dylan pressed on. "As compensation for this inconvenience, I will pay 1.5 times the usual rent, plus fees for your services as cook and maid. Does that sound acceptable?" Helen forced a faint smile and nodded. With the path to her prize now clear, it would be foolish to back out. One does not refuse fortune's gifts. "Then it's settled," Dylan said, resting his palms on the chair's arms. "We need only agree on the move-in date." Attempting a lighter tone, Helen ventured, "Would next Monday suit you, Senior?" Dylan laughed warmly. "Perfect, Miss Massey." They exchanged a few more pleasantries, and Helen, thanking the courteous Mr. Woodwords for his time, hurried from the hotel. All the way home she rehearsed how to tell Kevin of her bold scheme. She intended to present him with $1 million on a silver platter. She could even conceal Woodwards' identity, for after all, perhaps she might receive an inheritance someday too. Then no one need suspect a strange man would live in her home for a month. But the scenario troubled her. She would remain in her apartment while Kevin decamped to the suburbs. He might think she had unceremoniously kicked him out. No, she'd have to explain everything. And that conversation terrified Helen. Chapter 8. Dylan raised a surprised eyebrow. "Are you sure? I've always thought journalists led hectic lives." "And yet I dine at home nearly every evening," Helen shot back, determination in her voice. "And as you can see, I do not traipse about in stained clothing or scuffed shoes." But she paused, then added with feigned casualness, "Of course, I'm not insisting you stay with me. Ultimately, it's your choice." Dylan leaned back, drumming his fingers on the armrests. After a moment's deliberation, he tossed his head up, folded his arms, and fixed Helen with a cool, appraising stare, his eyes sharp and distant, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Though who's the prey here?" Helen wondered. "Very well," he said thoughtfully. "That will suit me. But I must warn you of my conditions." Helen straightened. "I intend to live in your home for 1 month," he continued, piercing her with a keen glance. "During that time, you must not be absent for more than 24 hours at a stretch. Should that happen, our agreement is null and void, and I reserve the right to have the payment for any days already spent." Helen's mind reeled. She had envisioned spending that month with Kevin, darting home daily to cook for him and share stolen moments. Now her dream of a honeymoon-like respite crumbled. "As compensation for this inconvenience," Dylan went on, "I will pay 1.5 times the normal rent plus fees for your services as cook and maid. Does that sound acceptable?" Helen forced a smile and nodded. With the path to her prize now clear, it would be folly to back out. One does not refuse fortune's gifts. "Then it's settled," Dylan declared, palms resting on the chair's arms. "We need only agree on the move-in date." Trying for a lighter tone, Helen suggested, "Would next Monday work for you, Senior?" Dylan's laughter was warm. "Perfect, Miss Massey." They exchanged a few more pleasantries, and Helen, thanking Mr. Woodwards for his time, hurried out of the hotel. On her drive home, she rehearsed how to break the news to Kevin, $1 million on a silver platter. She could even conceal Woodwords' identity. After all, perhaps she would inherit someday herself, and no one need guess that a stranger lived in her house for a month. Yet the scenario troubled her. She would remain in her flat while Kevin decamped to the suburbs. Would he think she had kicked him out? No, she would have to tell him everything. And that conversation terrified Helen. Once, while dining al fresco at an Italian restaurant in the Milan suburbs, Silvia had flashed him a captivating smile and said, "It's time we pondered our future." "We know each other well enough by now," she added, swirling a glass of ruby red wine. "What if I moved into your home and we sold my flat, put the profit into a joint venture? 2 apartments cost more than one. You want to move in with me?" Dylan had replied, startled by the sudden proposal. He genuinely wondered where it had come from. Besides, what business could they share? They worked in entirely different fields. Their occasional meetings, sometimes at his place, sometimes at hers, had suited him fine. On rare weekends, when work allowed, they'd escape to the coast together. Silvia was fun and full of life. She danced folk dances, played the mandolin, and occasionally staged theatrical performances for Dylan at home, laced with a heady sensuality. It was delightful company, but he was in no hurry to cohabit. He wasn't ready to alter his life. "I thought you valued your independence most of all," he said, repeating her earlier sentiment. "Why this sudden urge for a shared household?" Silvia shrugged her golden-tanned shoulders and answered calmly, "I mean, we could marry. I'd make an excellent wife. You might not believe it, but I'm a wonderful homemaker." Her frank declaration disarmed Dylan. Such businesslike straightforwardness shattered half the enchantment she'd woven. He realized, with a twinge of regret, that the remaining half of her charms wasn't enough to spend his life by her side. He lowered his gaze, uncertain how to break the truth gently. Silvia misread his silence. "I understand you need time to think," she said. "But I believe we shouldn't delay. My art exhibit closes in 3 weeks, and afterward my schedule eases. We could hold a modest wedding and set off on a cruise. Of course, we can't lounge away an entire month, but 10 days on a sunlit island would be perfect, don't you think?" With graceful assurance, she placed her hand upon his. Dylan found himself noticing the delicate gold bracelet around her wrist. Mustering a polite smile, he replied, "No need for haste. We'll have time to discuss it." Silvia leaned back, a trace of disappointment in her smile. "Of course." They never returned to the subject, but Dylan would catch her hopeful glances from time to time. Yes, she was a determined woman. She'd even set the timetable. And now, recalling her certainty, he bristled. She'd taken their union as a foregone conclusion, settling only on dates. What prevented him, Dylan, from granting her this bold wish? Silvia was beautiful, intelligent, and not without means. She was right. She'd make a fine wife for someone intent on success. But just not for Dylan. He was intrigued, charmed, and fascinated, anything but in love. He sensed Silvia felt little for him beyond convenience and companionship. They measured each other, as it were, for utility, not passion. Moreover, her endless attempts to spice up their private life had begun to grate on him. Dylan was no prude. He welcomed variety. Yet Silvia's habit of stocking every novelty from the boutique had grown tiresome. When he stayed at her flat, she would turn their romantic evenings into marathon performances, eager to sample every new gadget. Whenever he hinted that these contrivances did little for his arousal, she would laugh good-naturedly and plead, "Just a bit more, darling, don't be such a bore," before arching her back and offering herself anew. He caught himself wondering, did Helen enjoy such exuberant playfulness? And was he even capable of imagining intimacy with the diligent journalist? Helen Massey stirred no erotic spark in him. She struck him as sweetly sister-like. He was certain that, after a week under her roof, that sentimental fondness would vanish entirely. Dylan rose and settled behind his laptop. Within minutes, he was absorbed in work, Silvia, Helen, and even his forthcoming move to Cleveland receding from his mind.